Hey Charles, got your brake booster finished? And before I go any further, what I'm going to do is show you that your brake light switch does work. I have to do this now because when the machine's running you won't be able to hear the meter, but I've got on ohms on sound, and so I'm going to pump up your booster and you'll hear the meter squeal. So you've got a brake light switch that works. Off, back on. And it looks like it starts at about 150 psi is when it starts squealing. There you go. Now then, I'm going to turn the meter off. We don't need that anymore. And let's see what we're going to test. The vacuum system. Got 2 vacuum gauges. Both of them are going to pump up to whatever vacuum my pump can produce. And this gauge is going to stay stationary while this gauge slowly goes to 0 the more the booster is activated. And when the booster is fully activated, the gauge will be reading 0. And this gauge right here is one that goes into your vacuum check valve, which I rebuilt. This gauge goes to this hose right here, which goes into this test port right here. And this is what you can test. You can use this to test your booster. And all you got to do is hook up a vacuum gauge to this test port and start the car and push on the brakes. And the more you push on the brakes, the closer your vacuum gauge will get to 0 until you actually have the brakes fully engaged. Testing the hydraulic side. Okay, input. Got our input, which is the lower fitting right here. Output, of course, is coming out the long slave cylinder. So these 2 gauges are tied together, and this gauge is going to go up and max out, and this gauge goes up and reads final input pressure as supplied by my master cylinder, which is nothing more than this lever attached to a pump inside the machine. Output. Both gauges again are tied together. This gauge goes up and maxes out, and this gauge reads final output pressure. Now this booster is about a 3.5 or maybe 4 to 1 boost ratio. So what we should see is a multiple of 350. So in the 700, maybe 900, 1200 psi range when this thing is activated, and that's with my master cylinder. Obviously when you're doing a panic stop, the pressure is going to be a lot higher. But anyway, first I'm going to test it without the vacuum to show you that if without vacuum the booster is inert, and all it does is it's the brake fluid goes in one way and comes out the other. The booster is inert, and the way you're going to see that is this final input pressure is going to equal the output pressure. See, we've got 350 in, 350 out, 350 out right there. Now, let's hit with some vacuum. The bleed off is due to my master cylinder leaking internally. Now we're going to go over here, see our pressures. Alright, 350 in, 1200 out. If we really crank down on the handle, get the 1500 psi out. Fully engaged over here. Vacuum's doing fine. Max pressure, and while we're at max pressure we check for leaks. Check for our bleed screws leaking. Don't even bother to use this as a bleed screw. All you want to use is this top bleed screw. If there's going to be a leak, it's going to be at this joint right here. And that's it. a nice booster. That's a very nice booster. Now then, in order to keep this from leaking when you install your brake fittings, you're going to probably have to crank down on this pretty hard to get that copper sealed to seal up with the adapter or the hollow bolt that goes in there. That's why there's flats right here. Put a wrench on these flats and hold this slave cylinder stationary while you wrench down on your seal rings right there. Because otherwise, if you wrench down too hard, you can overcome the pressure that this jam nut is putting on to hold this slave cylinder in position, and you don't want to go messing around with that. So use a big old wrench right here, and then do all your wrenching right there. And the same thing with taking off the cap that's going to be on there to seal this thing for transit. That cap is cranked on there pretty tight. It's a plug, and it takes a 13mm wrench, and so you'll want to hold on to this, even just removing the plug that we put in there. So that's it. Got a good booster. Thank you for sending it to me.